Okay, so it is your job to bring an article from the Google or someplace for the day. So what article did you find?
Well, I found a couple, and the first one we're going to talk about is they're both from Inc. magazine. The first one we're going to talk about is a great caveat to what we talked about last week, and it's called "Starbucks Wasn't Built in a Day. Entrepreneurs were told to go big or go home. Stop obsessing over scale and perfect the basics." And especially with the Shark Tank show out there, and the emphasis being on how fast can you scale, how fast can you scale. There's something that's really missing in that to a certain extent, and the pressure's on, and you're seeing IPOs happening again, and so that pressure's on. But if you don't pay attention to the basics, you're not going to scale. You're going to implode, right?
I don't know what happened to small business people, but somewhere along the line, it seems like everybody I talk with, they're already thinking about store number 5 before they actually even open up store number 1 or buy number 1.
Well, now there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with visioning where you want to be. I think the problem is sometimes they want to scale too fast, or they're not. Perfect example. You're talking about location number 5 or whatever, a restaurant that I was consulting with, doing success, growing very successfully with the first location, and got to open up a second location, but had not perfected the basics in the initial location, and so. The unfortunate reality is what convinced him to stay focused on that first location were the financials, not the logic. But I was thankful that the financials made him realize he should just expand the existing location, get those systems in place, get some of that protocol in place, and know that it's really operating in like an engine. And then look at that second location. But yeah, everyone's like, I've been so successful. It's like they feel like they have to prove their success by doing something that is not necessarily in the best interest of their long-term success.
Well, to me, the challenge is the reason why you duplicate operations is because that success has proven itself.
Exactly.
And it's the only way to actually, I'm sorry, did you say exactly? That's
yes.
what you said.
Yeah.
So, the way you do that may not actually be the way you open up that second location. There are things that happen in that first operation you may not be able to duplicate, and that's what the challenge is for the second store. And I always tell these business people that come to me and say, "Man, I think I'm ready for a second store." Be careful, move very slow. Right. I have seen a lot of more people fail by trying to expand than just simply opening up that one operation.
Well, and a really good example of what you just said about sometimes the second location isn't going to be exactly like the first. And again, it goes back to understanding how you want to scale and why you want to scale and where you want to scale. And I got an example of a Pilates studio that when we looked at their ideal target market, at the time I started working with them, they were going to just... They had almost signed a lease to a location that was just a few miles down the road. And I was so thankful once we went through the strategic process that they had not signed that lease.
Right.
Because what happened is they ended up going way down the road, and their second location was actually focused on, we basically identified 3 target markets, and they were based on a money mentality. And I use that as an example in one of my books. It was old money, new money, and corporate money. The old money was the Habitat for Humanity, the 55 to 70-some-year-old woman who was doing Pilates to feel good and be strong and be able to go hiking with their grandkids, right? The new money were the socialites and the sports figure wives, and they were in their 20s into their mid-40s, and they were doing Pilates for how they looked. They wanted to look like they were on that red carpet at all times. And then the corporate money was a mixture of men and women, and they were doing Pilates from a stress factor, so they wouldn't pull their hair out if they were a woman, or they weren't losing their hair if they were a man. And so they needed early mornings and late nights. So that second location actually focused on the new money and the corporate money just because the location was centered around where these people lived and worked. And so it had to operate a little differently, and it focused even in its marketing a little bit differently than what we called the old money location. Makes sense? So yeah, you make a very valid point, but you have to know why before you go where.
And just for people that are listening, that's why you write a check and get Sherre to give you all that detail. And if you want my opinion, I could sum it up for you a lot simpler, and that is you're not there. Because what happens is I'm the guy running the first operation, right? And so now when you open up two, at best, I'm only operating either one of them 50% of the time. And so that's the reality. You cannot be in both of those places. So something will be different about either the new place or about where you're leaving to open up the second operation. And so that is the biggest key. And I can't tell you until you plug yourself in how we're going to pull you out to open up the second location, or we're not going to pull you out of the first location. And so definitely that second location is not going to have one thing, you. And that is the biggest challenge. And that's a big deal. I mean, most people don't realize that the jump starting of a business is very personality driven.
Yeah, it is.
And that piece of it is very difficult.
Culture. Yeah, it is. And we also should talk about scaling from the standpoint of local to regional to national to international, and understanding the caveats of effective scaling in that regard, because there's that pressure. Oh, we've got to expand beyond our current footprint. And I like to say it's not about sales, it's about profits. It's not about appeal, it's about preference, and it's not about footprint, it's about foothold. And so understanding, do you really need to expand out of the area? Have you really done all that you can do where you are right now?
And will it make you any more money? Because you might be surprised.
It might cost you a lot more.